It started as a normal evening. I had just returned home from a long day, my mind still buzzing with reports and errands. The street was quiet, the kind of silence that makes you think everything is peaceful. I pulled into my driveway, only to realize there was barely any room to maneuver. I had to block my own car for just a moment, while I shuffled things around. Simple. Routine. Nothing unusual. But then I noticed her. Karen. She was standing across the street, arms crossed, glaring at me with the kind of intensity that makes your stomach twist. I'd seen her around before, always watching, always judging, but I never imagined she'd turn a minor inconvenience into something larger. Her eyes were fixed on me, and within seconds, she was on her phone. I could hear the faint murmurs, the clicking of buttons, and the unmistakable tension building. Minutes later, the sound of sirens pierced the quiet neighborhood. Red and blue lights bounced off the houses, cutting through the dusk like knives. My heart sank. What started as a trivial moment, blocking my own driveway, was now a full-blown situation. Two police officers stepped out of their vehicle, calm but watchful, and approached me. I tried to explain, to make sense of the situation, but the words felt hollow. Every gesture, every sentence seemed to tighten the air around us. The officers glanced at the neighbor, Karen, with something like hesitation or maybe disbelief, and I could tell that this was going to escalate beyond the normal neighbor dispute. Her expression didn't waver. She seemed convinced of a wrongdoing that didn't exist. And then one of the officers said something that made my stomach drop. I was being summoned. Not fined. Not warned. Summoned. To my command office. I paused. My own command office. The place I was supposed to feel safe. The space where I held authority. Where I managed situations and people every day. It suddenly felt like an unfamiliar battlefield. Questions raced through my mind. How could this small, seemingly insignificant moment lead me here? Why was Karen's reaction taken so seriously? And most importantly, what would await me at the command office? I walked toward my house, glancing at her one last time. She didn't smile, didn't look away. Just that unwavering stare. It was the kind of look that makes you feel like you're already inside a story you don't yet understand. A story that might spiral further than you imagined. I knew one thing for sure. This night was far from over. And as I stood there, the police still lingering in the driveway, my mind couldn't stop racing. What seemed simple had turned into a mystery. And the real question wasn't about my driveway anymore. It was about how one neighbor's obsession could push me into a situation I wasn't prepared for. The summons awaited, and I had no idea what I would find on the other side. As I walked into my house, the quiet hum of the neighborhood felt heavier than before. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside the window seemed amplified. It wasn't just the police or Karen's accusations. It was the sense that something small had triggered a chain of events beyond my control. I sank into my chair, trying to calm my racing mind, but memories kept surfacing. Karen had always been the type to insert herself into others' business. I'd met her a few years ago when I first moved into this neighborhood. At first, she seemed harmless, even friendly, waving at everyone as if she owned the streets. But over time, her subtle judgments, her constant monitoring, became impossible to ignore. Packages left on porches, kids playing in yards, cars parked for a few minutes. Nothing escaped her scrutiny. Most neighbors brushed it off, but I had learned to keep a careful distance. My own life hadn't made things easier. Between long shifts, late-night reports, and the responsibilities that came with my position, I barely had time to manage my own home, let alone deal with the neighbors' escalating obsessions. Blocking my driveway, a momentary and necessary action, should have been insignificant. Yet, in Karen's eyes, it became evidence of wrongdoing, a perfect excuse to drag in the authorities. I remembered one earlier incident, a subtle warning sign. A package was delivered to my porch, and she somehow convinced the neighborhood watch that it was suspicious. It wasn't even addressed to her, yet she had complained, sent emails, and even spoken to the local patrol. That day, I felt a strange mixture of irritation and unease. like she was testing boundaries, seeing how far she could push before anyone stopped her. And now, it seemed, she had pushed just far enough. The tension wasn't just external, it gnawed at me internally. I kept replaying the moments leading up to the driveway incident, wondering if I had misread her, if I had unknowingly provoked her wrath. Each thought spiraled into another. Could this escalate further? Would my reputation, my position, be affected? How seriously would the command office take something that, in my mind, was so minor? Even my family noticed the change. My partner glanced at me over breakfast, concern etched across their face. Are you sure you're okay? They asked, but I couldn't reassure them. Not really. The truth was, I didn't know if I was okay. The situation felt like a storm approaching, invisible yet unstoppable. Every glance outside, every unexpected sound made me jump. The once familiar neighborhood now carried a shadow, one that seemed to follow me into my own home. And yet, amid the anxiety, there was something almost thrilling. A mystery had been set in motion, and I couldn't help but feel the pull of what was coming next. The summons was a summons not just to an office, but to the unknown. Something larger than a driveway dispute was unfolding, and I was standing right in the middle of it, unsure of what role I would play or what truths I would uncover. The clock ticked, the shadows grew longer, and I knew, deep down, that by the time I stepped into the command office, nothing would feel the same again. The next morning, the tension didn't ease, it shifted, grew heavier in subtle ways. As I got ready for work, I noticed a small envelope slipped under my door. No name, no return address. Just a folded piece of paper with a single line scrawled in hurried handwriting. You think it's over? Think again. My stomach dropped. Was it Karen? Or someone else entirely? The message was vague enough to unsettle me, yet personal enough to feel like a warning. I tried to push it aside, focusing on my daily routine, but the drive to the command office felt different. Every red light, every passing car made me flinch. The officers I passed gave polite nods, oblivious to the storm brewing inside my head. And yet, there was a new element I hadn't accounted for. Whispers among colleagues. Subtle comments, sideways glances, questions about whether I'd handled the driveway situation appropriately. It was as if a small personal conflict had already started leaking into my professional life. Meanwhile, Karen's presence continued to loom. I saw her across the street, waving at another neighbor, her smile polite but calculating. It was almost theatrical, like she knew more than she let on and was enjoying the control she wielded. I realized then that this wasn't just about a driveway. It was about influence, perception, and power, things she understood far better than I ever had to. Even my own internal conflict added another layer. Part of me wanted to confront her, to set boundaries once and for all, but another part, the part conditioned by years of discipline and professionalism, urged caution. How far should I push? At what point did defending myself cross into retaliation? I felt torn between my own sense of justice and the need to maintain order. Each decision seemed loaded with consequences I couldn't fully see. At the office, the tension escalated further. My commanding officer called me into a quiet room, papers neatly stacked, eyes sharp and unreadable. I could feel the weight of expectations, the pressure of maintaining composure, while navigating an unfamiliar situation. Questions were asked indirectly, probing, testing reactions. I noticed subtle details, a pen tapping rhythmically, a chair creaking under someone's weight, the faint scent of coffee mixed with tension. Every moment seemed like a test, every glance a potential accusation. Parallel to this, another subplot quietly emerged. One of my closest colleagues, someone I trusted, seemed unusually distant. Small comments, careful phrasing, hints that I wasn't fully aware of yet. Was there an internal discussion about me? About the incident? Or was it merely my imagination, heightened by stress? Either way, it added a creeping sense of isolation. And through it all, the core question remained. What began as a simple misunderstanding over a blocked driveway had spiraled into a labyrinth of suspicion, observation, and moral dilemmas. I couldn't know who was watching, who might intervene, or who might misinterpret my every move. Every choice felt heavy, every glance calculated. The tension wasn't just external anymore, it had burrowed inside, making every step, every interaction, feel like a gamble. By the time I left the office, the day felt longer, heavier, and more uncertain than ever. The mystery was no longer just Karen versus me. It had expanded, drawing in colleagues, neighbors, and even my own doubts. And as I walked back to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was still waiting just around the corner. By mid-afternoon, the air felt heavier than ever. Every sound seemed amplified. The distant hum of a lawn mower, the creak of a neighbor's gate, even the soft shuffle of papers from my office desk. I could feel it pressing against my chest, a constant reminder that this situation was no longer just about a driveway. Something bigger was coming, and I couldn't tell if I was ready. I glanced at my phone. No messages from Karen. No new envelopes slipped under the door. Yet I knew better than to relax. She was calculating, patient, waiting. And patience can be more dangerous than anger. At the command office, things had shifted. Conversations became sharper. Eyes lingered longer. Every email I opened felt like it was under scrutiny. My colleagues, usually cordial, now carried a subtle wariness in their voices. One comment in particular lingered in my mind. Better make sure everything's documented carefully. Was it concern? Or a warning? I couldn't tell. I kept replaying that evening on the driveway. Karen's glare, the rapid call to the police, the flashing lights reflecting off my car. And then, the summons. That moment felt different now. It wasn't just a summons. It was a spotlight. Everyone could see it. Everyone could judge. And with judgment came consequences. The internal tension grew. I found myself questioning every action, every choice. Could I trust the people around me? Could I trust my own judgment? Doubt crept in like a shadow, twisting my thoughts. I thought about confronting Karen directly, about standing my ground, but hesitation lingered. What if it escalated? What if I said the wrong thing, at the wrong time, in the wrong place? Even at home, the tension didn't ease. I noticed small changes. Packages slightly moved, the curtains drawn tighter, a shadow flitting past the window that shouldn't have been there. Each subtle detail made my pulse quicken. It was as if the world had shifted slightly, and I was no longer moving in familiar territory. Then there was the office twist I hadn't anticipated. My commanding officer had scheduled an unexpected meeting. Just me, the officer, and a file. The door closed behind me, and the room felt smaller, suffocating. I could see the weight of expectation in their eyes. Every question asked seemed loaded. Every pause held meaning. And in those pauses, I sensed judgment. I sensed scrutiny. I sensed that even MY's smallest misstep could tip the balance. I left the meeting with a knot in MY's stomach. Something was coming. I could feel it, not clearly, but enough to know it would change everything. Karen, the officers, even MY's own colleagues. They were pieces on a board, and I was trapped in the middle. By the time I stepped outside, dusk had fallen. The streetlights flickered to life, casting long shadows. I looked toward MY driveway, toward the place it all started. Nothing had changed. Yet everything had changed. The calm I once felt in MY own neighborhood was gone, replaced by anticipation. The moment of confrontation, or revelation, was just around the corner. And I knew, without a doubt, that when it came, nothing would be the same. Just when I thought the tension had reached its peak, everything shifted. I got a call from an unexpected number, MY colleague, someone I'd trusted completely. Their voice was low, almost trembling. "You need to see this before anyone else finds out," they said. MY heart skipped a beat. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I rushed back to the office, MY mind racing. When I arrived, they handed me a folder I hadn't seen before. Inside were photos, emails, and messages, not from Karen, not from the neighborhood, but from within the department itself. It was subtle at first, small incidents, almost dismissible. But the more I read, the more it became clear. Someone was trying to manipulate the situation, to make MY driveway incident appear far more serious than it was. And then the betrayal hit me. The messages were coming from a colleague I had considered a close friend. Someone I had relied on for years. Every piece of evidence pointed toward them using Karen's complaint as leverage, twisting events behind the scenes, and trying to trap me in a narrative I hadn't even seen coming. The realization hit like a punch. This wasn't just about Karen's obsession. This was about politics, manipulation, and someone exploiting my position for their own gain. I tried to process it, but the room seemed to spin. Every glance around the office felt charged. Could I trust anyone? Was Karen merely a pawn in a larger scheme? The lines between friend and foe blurred. My stomach churned with anger, confusion, and betrayal. Meanwhile, across the street, Karen went about her day, oblivious, or so it seemed, to the chaos unfolding. I couldn't tell if she had any awareness of the deeper scheme at play, or if she was simply delighted by the turmoil she had started. Her role, once central, suddenly felt secondary to the hidden forces now shaping the events around me. And then came the subtle warning. Another envelope slipped under my door that evening. This one wasn't just a note, it contained photos, timestamps, and locations showing my movements from earlier that week. Someone had been tracking me, documenting everything, waiting for the perfect moment to escalate. I realized then that the stakes had grown far beyond a neighbor dispute. My personal life, my reputation, even my position in the command office, were all at risk. The twist wasn't just the betrayal itself, it was the timing. Karen's call to the police, the summons, the scrutiny from colleagues, all of it had been carefully orchestrated. And now, armed with this new information, I understood that my next steps would be scrutinized even more closely. Every decision could have far-reaching consequences. Every word I spoke, every action I took, could tip the balance in favor of someone I hadn't even suspected. I stepped outside, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of the web I was caught in. The street was quiet again, but I could feel the tension in the air, thick and unrelenting. The question no longer was whether I could handle Karen. It was whether I could navigate the hidden games, the betrayals, and the manipulations waiting for me at every turn. The storm wasn't just approaching. It had already begun, and I was standing right in the center of it, with no clear way out. The day of the meeting arrived, and I felt the weight of every choice I had made pressing down on me. Walking into the command office, I could sense eyes on me, subtle whispers in the background, the faint hum of fluorescent lights blending with my racing heartbeat. Everything led to this moment, the driveway incident, Karen's obsession, the betrayal, the hidden surveillance. Every tension point converged here, and I knew there would be no turning back. I was escorted to a quiet conference room. The door closed behind me with a soft but final click. My commanding officer sat at the head of the table, calm but alert, and across from them was my betraying colleague. Their expression had shifted from polite concern to something harder, calculating, defensive. Karen was nowhere in sight, and that absence was unnerving. The conversation began with the driveway incident, the police report, the summons. My colleague tried to spin the narrative, waving a subtle version of events designed to put me in a bad light. But I had the folder, the photos, the emails. I presented everything slowly, deliberately, letting each revelation land with weight. Faces shifted. Tension built. The betrayal, the manipulation, the lease, it all became undeniable. And then came the twist no one expected. Karen appeared quietly at the doorway, her usual bravado gone. She had seen the evidence, understood the manipulation, and approached me with a surprising calm. In that moment, the woman I had assumed was my adversary became an unexpected ally. She admitted she had called the police not out of malice, but because she had been manipulated by my colleague, convinced they were acting in the department's interest. Her honesty shifted the entire dynamic. The room felt electric. My commanding officer leaned back, digesting the full picture. The tension broke not with anger, but with clarity. I realized the real battle wasn't against Karen or even the police, it was against deception, against the hidden agendas that had spiraled out of control. My colleague, caught off guard, stammered, trying to justify the actions, but the evidence was overwhelming. By the end of the meeting, the truth had emerged. The driveways, the envelopes, the whispered warnings, they were all pieces of a larger puzzle, now finally aligned. Karen apologized, and I accepted, recognizing that her actions had been misdirected by someone else's schemes. My colleague faced consequences, but the resolution wasn't about punishment. It was about uncovering the truth and restoring balance. Yet, just as I thought the storm had passed, a final, unexpected detail arrived. Another envelope, smaller, almost unnoticeable, lay on my desk. Inside was a note. This isn't over. Watch carefully. My pulse quickened. The chapter might have closed, but the story, my story, was far from complete. I stepped outside, the neighborhood quiet once more, yet tinged with the memory of tension and betrayal. Karen waved from across the street, a silent acknowledgement of the strange alliance we had forged. And as I looked at my driveway, my mind swirled with lessons learned. Trust is fragile, appearances deceive, and sometimes the smallest actions ignite the largest storms. I walked forward, cautious but resolute, knowing that whatever came next, I would face it with eyes wide open. The conflict had resolved, for now, but the shadow of what could happen lingered, sharp, unpredictable, and unforgettable. In the days that followed, the neighborhood slowly returned to its usual rhythm. The flashing lights and tense murmurs were gone, replaced by the quiet hum of everyday life. And yet, the events of that night and the following days left an indelible mark. I realized how quickly trust could be fractured, how a small incident could spiral into something far greater, and how often the truth hides beneath layers of misdirection. Karen and I developed a cautious understanding. Our interactions were no longer tinged with suspicion, but there remained a subtle awareness of boundaries. She had played a part, unintentionally, in the chaos, yet she had also shown honesty and courage in coming forward when the real manipulation was revealed. It was a strange alliance, forged in tension and tempered by truth. The driveway incident would always be a reminder, not of anger, but of the complexity of human behavior, and how even the smallest choices ripple outward. As for my colleague, the betrayal served as a sharp lesson. I learned that positions of trust carry not only authority, but vulnerability. People we believe we know well may have hidden motives, and navigating that reality requires vigilance, patience, and integrity. It was a painful truth, but also a necessary one. I focused on restoring professional relationships and rebuilding confidence in the office, mindful of the subtle dynamics that can so easily disrupt order. Personally, I found myself reflecting on the deeper emotional currents of the experience. The fear, the anxiety, the uncertainty, they were exhausting, yes, but they also revealed resilience I hadn't fully acknowledged in myself. I discovered the importance of standing firm, of documenting and verifying, of seeking clarity before reacting. The incident had forced me to examine my own judgment, my reactions under pressure, and my ability to manage not just tasks, but the human complexities intertwined with them. Looking back, the driveway, the police call, and the summons to my command office were never truly about those moments. They were about awareness of intentions, of hidden agendas, of the fragility of assumptions. They were about learning to navigate life with eyes wide open, to understand that every interaction, no matter how small, can carry unexpected weight. And so, as I walk past that same driveway, now calm and familiar once more, I carry a quiet sense of vigilance, tempered by experience. I know there will always be shadows, moments when people's actions are unclear, motives concealed, and the stakes unseen. But I also know that truth has a way of emerging, and integrity remains a guiding compass. Even the smallest spark can ignite the largest storm, but it is how we face the fire that defines us. If you've ever faced a situation where trust was broken, or a simple moment escalated beyond expectation, remember, pay attention, stay calm, and stand firm. And if you want to hear more stories of unexpected twists, human drama, and suspense that keeps you on edge, make sure to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell, because the next story could be even more shocking.